This is episode number 91, My Birth Story. Super excited to share with you my birth story. Wow, holy shit. Let's just start with that. I have so much respect for all birthing women, no matter how it happens, no matter where it happens, no matter how it plays out. It's massive. And of course, there's so much anticipation in the lead up to birth, and you can somewhat try to prepare, but I feel like there's nothing that can prepare you for the transformation that is birth, that transformation from maiden to motherhood, and the journey that you may go through in labor and in birth to meeting your baby, and how that shapes you as a woman and as a mother. It's ginormous. And while I expected it to be big, I just really didn't know what I was in for. In saying that, I'm so grateful for the experience. I think that, every challenging or trying experience that I've had to do with, the conception of our baby or the birth of our baby and everything that's led to this little human in my household who's currently napping while I record this podcast, every challenge and trial and tribulation has been beautiful in my eyes, and I'm really grateful for all of it, just to be able to experience all of it. I truly believe that we were put on this earth to just experience all of these beautiful, hard, joyful, wonderful, magical things, and get that wide range of human experiences and feel that wide range of emotions. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think that all of it has built a lot of resilience in me as a new mama at this point in my life. So here it is. Let's jump into it. I'll try to keep it short and sweet-ish. So as you may know, if you've been following, I planned, quote unquote, planned and prepared for a home birth, and my baby girl ended up being delivered via cesarean section. Another beautiful example of how life just gives you what you need and not what you plan for. And often, it can turn out better than you ever imagined. So I didn't have the birth that I quote unquote planned. I had the birth that I was meant to have, and there were two souls driving this journey. There was me and my baby girl, and I knew this throughout the pregnancy, and that she would be present in, we'd be working together, not only with the incredible biofeedback that happens in labor and birth, but, our souls working together, and her soul needed to go on a journey just as mine did before we met each other earthside. So we were both driving the journey of labor and birth, and we worked together through it. And I love the thought of the fact that we were working together, that we went on this really beautiful journey together. I just feel like that's such a beautiful connection that I have with my daughter, that we went on this big fucking hard, long journey together, and we came out the other side. And yeah, I couldn't have done it without her, obviously. It's really special. I'm such an advocate for the power of the female body and the power of physiological birth, as you would have heard me talk about, when we intervene as little as possible from the get-go, from the very beginning of pregnancy, really to allow that beautiful, natural physiological process to take place. So, I've always been a big advocate of that throughout my pregnancy. As I'm learning about the female body, I think it's quite incredible. I'm also always so appreciative and grateful for modern medicine and medical technology, for incredible doctors, for specialists and surgeons who make actual miracles every day, who save lives, who make lives better. I always said on my IVF journey that my fertility specialist was an angel and my embryologist was a wizard, and they were such an incredible team. I mean, we couldn't have conceived our baby without them. So I'm so grateful for modern medicine. And I was really, although I was going down the natural home birth route, I've always had such an open mind and gratitude for modern medicine. And in my eyes, I think that's, a really healthy, important mindset to adopt. I think there can be toxic cultures on either side of the spectrum. In human nature, we take things too far sometimes. So I think it's nice to, if you're in that middle ground and if you're accepting of what's happening and open to different ideology and different things happening on your journey, then it makes it a lot easier when you have those bumps in the road and when things don't go as planned. So I say I'm the poster girl for IVF, right? And now I would be happy to be the poster girl for cesarean section birth, because both of them were empowering and magical experiences for me. And I really want to stand up and say to women that I got help every step of the way. I needed that help. I needed the intervention, and that is okay. So if you need the help, if you need the intervention at any point in your journey, it's okay. It doesn't take away from your worth, and it doesn't mean anything at all about you. We had a long fertility journey. We also had a long pregnancy and a long labor before meeting our girl. So there's something in that, right? It was all worth every single second when we saw her face when she came out, when we both threw our heads back in sobs. My husband thinks he cried more than me, but yeah, it was pretty close. We were all three of us were howling, Sophia, Pelham and myself. It was pure magic, and that was all that mattered that point when we met her. It was just so beautiful. And if you've experienced this, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. She was everything we had waited for so long, and she was finally here. And I think my head being thrown back in sobs, it was like this feeling of relief. Like I just let everything go. Like, she's finally here. Holy shit. It's done, and of course there's more adventures and lessons and journeys now as my life moves on as a new mother, but that whole chapter of my life, like everything that led up to this point, and she's here, and it just all came out of me at once. So today I want to share my beautifully unpredictable birth story, a journey that once again reminded me of the uncertainty of life, and that the uncertainty in life is actually the best damn part. Because uncertainty means that anything can happen, and it means that, like I said, things can work out better than you plan or better than you imagine for yourself. And I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. Always thinking about the bigger picture of why we are on this planet and experiencing all of this in this lifetime. The bigger picture in this story being our healthy baby girl who is the cherry on top of a joyful life and a loving relationship. For those of you who don't know, we tried to conceive for 5 years before we chose the journey of IVF, and we conceived our beautiful baby girl on our first round of IVF. Very luckily, very grateful. It was a long and important journey that really shaped me, the woman that I am today. I just paused the recording to go and pick up baby girl who started waking up from her nap. So I've got babe in arms while I record the rest of this podcast, mum life, hashtag mum life. So let's carry on, babe in arms. So I was very fortunate to have had a really beautiful pregnancy. I had an easy pregnancy. I had minimal nausea, discomfort or pain. And I really attribute that to looking after my body throughout the pregnancy. So I did lots of body work with my chiropractor and massage therapist. I really looked after my body. I ate lots of nutritious foods. I went walking almost every day. I did yoga for most of the pregnancy. And I was just so in awe and grateful of my growing body the whole time. I think after so long and at points in the fertility journey, finding it hard to even envision myself pregnant, at times I could, at times I couldn't. And then here I was with this growing, expanding belly, and it was sort of like a pinch myself moment when I'd walk past a mirror or a reflective shop window And I'd be like, oh my God, like that's me. I'm pregnant. There's a human inside me. And I'm sure, you know, every woman has that feeling because it's just such a surreal experience. It's one of those true wonders of the world still, you know. Women walk around growing humans inside themselves all the time like it's normal, but it's fucking magic. It's really cool. So everything was smooth sailing until about week 36 of my pregnancy when we discovered that baby girl was in the breech position. So she was upside down. She had her head up near my ribs and her butt down the bottom. So obviously this was a little bit of a bump in the road. When it comes to a breech baby, there's several options. One of those being an ECV, in which an obstetrician can manually massage and turn the baby around. And this actually has quite a low success rate, unfortunately. It's about 50% success rate, and then sometimes the baby turns back around. Or the other option, if the baby doesn't turn, is a scheduled cesarean. And of course, there's the option of vaginal breech birth, although it isn't often, you know, where we are in this obstetric era, and I've spoken to an obstetrician about this in the hospital, in which there isn't much training, or there's a lack of training and education around vaginal breech birth. So it just simply isn't really recommended or supported in a lot of the hospitals and in the Cairns hospital where I live. So after waiting and waiting until the last minute, you know, I knew that baby girl could turn at any time when she wanted to until the last minute. And I knew that that was very normal. So I was trying to give myself as much time as possible. So we waited up until about 38 weeks until we considered an ECV. And initially I was uneasy about the ECV. I didn't want to force her to turn into a place that she didn't want to go. But after a few discussions with my husband and with our private midwife, I thought about how incredibly medical technology supported us in the conception of our baby girl. I mean, without it, she wouldn't be here. And I realized again that it was here to support me, that I could surrender to that help. And that felt really good for me. I mean, I think this was my first, you know, I had the realization that this was my first big parenting decision for my baby girl, for me and my baby girl, that I had to make for her. You know, and I think the biggest question that we can always ask ourselves is, does it feel good? Like, if it feels good and right for you, then that's, you know, you're making the best decision with what you have at the time. And what feels good and right for you may not feel good and right for someone else. And it doesn't matter what it looks like or what choice you make. You know, if it feels good and you are making that informed and empowered decision, then it's right for you and your family, and all of the choices that you are going to have to make in the future when parenting. So we had the ECV at around 38 weeks pregnant, and it was successful. So we had a really beautiful experience. I went into the Cairns hospital really open to having a good experience. We had a wonderful female obstetrician who turned Sophia around within a minute or two. It was really quickly, and she stayed there. So we had a good and successful experience. And all of a sudden, I was back in the running for my planned home birth. You know, I was back in the category of a normal, quote unquote, normal, low risk pregnancy, now that she was in the position that she should be for birthing. The other thing that the ECV gave me was relief. I mean, it took away a lot of the stress of birth considerations. If it wasn't successful, I would have had to make a whole bunch of other choices towards the end of my pregnancy and birth. So it allowed me to then just sit back and relax for the last few weeks of my pregnancy, and it took a lot of stress away once that was successful. So I was really grateful for that. So I relaxed and I relaxed and I relaxed, and I cooked and I cooked and I cooked. And my husband asked me if I was starting a soup kitchen, because I was cooking so much food, preparing for myself postpartum, which I highly recommend, by the way, until I was overcooking, and then I stopped because I was too pregnant. So we passed the 40-week mark, and then we passed the 41-week mark, and we were heading towards 42 weeks, and I was still pregnant. And I entirely understand how a woman would want to be induced at this point. There can be so much pressure and opinions from different directions, including friends and family, people around you in anticipation, waiting for something to happen. It's really exhausting, and it's a really vulnerable time to, right towards the end of your pregnancy, when you're about to go into that birthing zone. It's, things that people say can really affect you. So that is tough, and I get why women make that choice to get it over with and meet their baby. My biggest wish at this point, although I was open to whatever choices I had to make, but my biggest wish was that I would go into spontaneous labor and that my baby girl could choose when she was going to be born. So I really wanted to give my body the opportunity to go into spontaneous labor. So we were patient, and as we neared the end of 42 weeks and we started, on the path to head towards the 43rd week of pregnancy, it was quite daunting to me. I'd lost a lot of confidence, and I was wondering, is this baby ever going to come? I was super pregnant. I was so big. We were still doing beautiful walks every day. I still felt good and comfortable in my body. I think that made a big difference. I was still sleeping really well. I did throughout my entire pregnancy. So I still felt good considering I was so pregnant. So at 42 weeks on the dot, I had the first signs of labor, and this is when I had lost my mucus plug. So I had a fairly common and healthy first sign of labor, and I was happy about that. It boosted my confidence. I knew that labor was imminent, or early labor was imminent, and I knew that I was going to meet my baby girl soon. So that was a really good feeling. That Sunday night, I had light period-like pains throughout the night. And then the next day at 42 weeks and 1 day, I went into spontaneous labor on the Monday afternoon. So I went into early labor. My contractions began, and myself and my husband labored together through that night. So we were at home. We were laboring at home in the comfort of our own home, and our private midwife was there on call. So as things ramped up, she would come in, and throughout the labor, she came and visited us and supported us several times when we needed her. As I've mentioned before, it was a long labor journey. So on that first night of early labor, my labor progressed and intensified throughout the night, and the contractions became closer and closer. It was quite intense. Obviously, it's the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. I didn't know what to expect. It felt like things were progressing really quickly. Things were getting more intense. Contractions were getting closer, and I genuinely thought that by daylight, or by the next day at least, that something was going to happen, or that we would be really close. So our midwife came and checked on us that morning, and after laboring all night long for about 14 hours and pulling an all-nighter, of course, my husband and myself, my labor contractions completely slowed down. So it turns out my body did not in this birth like laboring in the daylight. So right before the sun rose at dawn, my labor almost entirely slowed down and almost stopped. This is a really weird sensation. If you've experienced it, you'll know when you're in labor and you're in the birth zone and your labor slows down and stops, because it doesn't mean that, labor has stopped. You're still in that zone. You're still very much in labor, but your contractions have slowed down and stopped. So it's very hard to sleep. It's very hard to eat food. Well, it was for me anyway. And my mind was still really in that labor mindset. So it was really interesting. So I tried to eat and sleep that day with little success. I had bits and pieces. It was a little bit daunting, the fact that, I kind of knew and had this feeling that I was going to go back into labor at nighttime. Like I just knew that once it got dark, my body would go back into labor and start contracting again. So I was a bit concerned that I would labor all night again, only to then stop in the morning. And a thought that was going through my head was that I thought that all of the labor, all of the contracting, all of that work we did the night before, all of that work that my body did was for nothing. You know, I felt like, oh my God, like we did all that and then it just stopped. Like, are we just starting again tonight? But my midwife, you know, I had a chat with my midwife and she assured me that no, like everything that, you know, all the work that you did was progress. So if anyone's ever in this same situation, like any work that you do in your labor, if it goes dormant, if it stops and starts, like it's all progress. It's all work that your body is doing to prepare you for birth. Sure enough, that night, second night, my labor contractions started up again. And this night was really different for me. I really understood the contractions. You know, I'd had all that experience from the night before. I really understood the contractions and how to manage them better, how to work through them. I understood the pain and intensity in a different way. So I felt really confident. I was working with the pain and moving through it. And it was intense, but I felt good about how I was handling it. And I remember at the start of the night, I was so tired. I tried to lay down in between contractions in bed just to get 3 to 5 minutes of sleep. But I found that was just slowing down labor. And I really wanted to just encourage the progression throughout that night. So I ended up getting up. I also got in and out of the birth pool that night, but because I was still in that sort of early labor zone, being in the pool slowed down labor again. So I got out of the pool again to encourage that progression of labor. My absolute rock of a husband and my husband was up just as much as me throughout this entire time. So that night I labored all night again, and my husband and I just listened to music. I remember I was on the birth swing most of this night. I was hanging off the birth swing and I was just moving through each contraction. There was a fair bit of space in between each contraction. There was still a couple of minutes. And this night didn't sort of build up and progress. The contractions stayed spaced apart throughout the entire night. It was really interesting because it's like I just contracted all night, but didn't sort of progress further towards, well, I was progressing, but it didn't feel like I was because the time in between contractions wasn't changing. And again, that's just, you know, a massive lesson that just because you don't see that physical proof or just because it's not what you think it should be, that you're not progressing in labor, in life, in everything, right? Because my body was doing the work and my body was progressing. Once again, could you believe it? I labored for another 14 hours, 14 hours of hard work. You know, it's not called labor for nothing. So we saw the daylight come, and not long after, my labor slowed down almost entirely and stopped again. This was really quite deflating for me. I couldn't quite believe that I had labored through 2 full nights and it had stopped again. I honestly wondered how long this would go on for and if I would ever give birth. These are thoughts that were going through my head. You know, imagine laboring all night one night and then all night another night and it keeps stopping. You think, is this going to happen a third time, a fourth time? Like, how long is this going to take? Obviously, it's so unpredictable. And the, you know, process of physiological birth and the time that your body needs to prepare for that is, you know, it's not on a timeline. It needs the time that it needs. And we don't know what that is. We can't schedule it. We can't plan for it. You know, we can in the hospital system. And if that's something that you want to do, then absolutely go for that. If you feel like you want that healthy sense of control and that feels good for you, then you can control the birth process. But I was in an environment and I'd made those choices that didn't allow me to. I remember my midwife, I was laying in bed and in a really awkward position trying to get some sleep, and she was just doing some relaxing body work, trying to encourage sleep. I think I may have gotten about an hour's sleep at that time, and that was the most, and that was actually incredible. I remember eating a bowl of oats this day, and I kept on munching on trail mix. So throughout my entire labor, I was munching on trail mix. I drank several cups of bone broth over these couple of days just to get in that good nutrition to sustain me, to keep me going. So much water, copious amounts of water, and also coconut water and hydrolyte icy poles were my best friend as well. So we kept up hydration, we kept up nutrition, and that was really, really important for my body to have that endurance. You know, I had my beautiful labor hormones supporting me and keeping me going, and I also just needed nutrition so that my body could do the job that it needed to do. So it was now Wednesday. It was hump day and my labor was dormant. We managed a slow and short walk out to the park behind our house on this day, I remember, and hubby was just so exhausted. He snuck in a couple of naps where he could, and I was really trying to encourage him to sleep so that he could get the rest that he needed to support me. But he had been awake almost as much as I had. And then in the middle of the afternoon on that day, I all of a sudden had very intense, sharp pains that were nonstop. And I honestly thought that something was wrong. I thought, what is going on? Something has gone wrong. Out of nowhere, you know, I got in the shower. I was trying to manage this pain. It was just like sharp pain, nonstop, on top of each other. So we called our private midwife. She had gone for a rest and she came back. And when she came back, she let me know that I was actually in active labor. So I had gone straight into active labor that afternoon, sort of just out of nowhere. When I was expecting another whole night of labor, I didn't know what to expect, but at about 1 p.m. I had gone into active labor. So finally, hello, active labor. And once I knew what it was, I had a better understanding. I was able to manage that pain better. I think I was like, oh, okay, so nothing is wrong. Like, this pain is normal. This is active labor. This is what it feels like. And from then, it only intensified. This was the most incredible, massive, intense night of my life. Holy shit, just like I said at the start. So from mid-afternoon until midnight, I was in active labor without breaks in between contractions. It was just rolling, one on top of the other with no relief in between, just extremely intense contractions throughout my entire body. My mind had almost shut down. When I say almost, I was in that active labor zone and I was mostly just out of my mind, but I feel like I still had an awareness of time and space and the people around me. I could still hear things that people said and sort of register them, and I was still very aware of time and how long everything was taking. I think that's something that never really shut off for me. So I breathed and moaned and moved through each contraction, one after the other, on top of each other. And I spent a fair bit of the night laboring in the birth pool. By this point in active labor, the birth pool didn't slow down labor. I was too deep. I was too far in it. So I was just moving and swinging my hips around in the birth pool nonstop, just trying to move through the pain, move through the intensity that was radiating through my body. And something interesting too is that for most of that night, I couldn't pass urine. So we had to use an in and out catheter to empty my bladder because baby girl, we think baby girl was pressing on my bladder in a way that I wasn't able to empty it. So when I was in the birth pool, there's something about the water that allowed me to urinate in small amounts. So that was a good place for me to be, to empty my bladder, because I was continuously hydrating, and that was really important. And the full bladder was definitely a bit of a pain during labor. So I stayed in the birth pool for that reason as well. On and on and on it went. It felt like forever. And like I said, I was really aware of how long it was taking. It felt, it was the most intense feeling that I've ever experienced in my life. If you've had those active labor intense contractions, you'll know what I'm talking about. I became more aware of how long it was taking and how much longer I could endure this for. I knew that, and I heard I heard comments that were made and things that people said. I knew that, it could be 3 hours until I started pushing my baby out. It could be 7 hours. It could be 10 hours. It could be 12 hours. And to me, the thought of it being another even 3 hours, but especially another 12 hours or 10 hours was just, I could not imagine that I could get through that. I just couldn't even fathom that I could keep going. It felt like I was just getting through each contraction, and I didn't know that I could just keep going and going and going. I didn't know if I could do it. I feel like at this point, exhaustion, being in the third day of labor and stress were beginning to creep in. And I feel like there was definitely an energetic shift in the room. And there was certain things that played a role here that were impacting me and my mindset and taking me out of that labor mindset. On top of this, I also had a deeper, intuitive feeling, and it may have been my baby girl guiding me and talking to me as well. I feel like I had a deeper, intuitive, feeling guiding me and into what action I needed to take next. And it almost, in my mind, I don't know what it looked like to people around me, but it felt like all of a sudden I could not do it anymore. I could not keep going. And at this point, I just wanted to go. I just wanted to get out of there. I feel like I needed a change of environment, a change of space. I had been laboring in this house for 3 days. And although, I love the comfort of our home, at this point, when my mindset had shifted, I just needed to get out, and I just wanted to go somewhere where they could help me. And as soon as I had shifted out of my labor mindset, I felt like as soon as that happened, it was like a switch was flicked, and it was like I lost all of my endorphins and my oxytocin and all of those beautiful pain relieving labor hormones. It felt like that was all turned off, and all of a sudden I felt everything 10 times stronger. Previous to that, it was a very intense feeling as I moved through each contraction. But now it was just pain. Now it was just, I was out of my mindset. It was just everything felt like agony, and each contraction felt like debilitating pain. I could feel it in my body. I could feel it in all of the nerves running down my legs. And at this point, for me, it was unbearable. And I'm being completely honest here. I don't want to scare women. I don't want to be negative, but I just want to be really vulnerable and honest. I had a really beautiful experience ultimately, but this is what I journeyed through to get there. So like I said, I feel like I had lost it. I'd feel like I had lost my safe space in my mind, and I felt like I couldn't get back there, and I needed to go to a new safe place. And all I wanted now was pain relief. Just give me pain relief. Give me whatever you've got. I'll take it. Give it to me. I need it now. My husband knew that he knows when my mind is made up, and he knew that my mind was made up. And so we transferred to the Cairns Hospital, which is only 3 minutes up the road. And as soon as I got into the birthing suite at the hospital, I felt instant relief. I just knew that was where I had to be at that point. It had been 3 long days of laboring. It had been, such intensity in my body. And I was finally in a place where people could give me some relief. At that point, like I said, the whole drive to the hospital was quite uncomfortable. I'm lucky it was a short one. And the journey up to the birthing suite, I was just in a lot of pain. I was really feeling all of that pain. I practically, I didn't envision myself begging for pain relief in a hospital suite when I was envisioning my birth, but that's what happened. I was practically, before we left the house, I was screaming at everyone. When we got to the hospital, I feel like I was screaming through my contractions. I feel like the whole birthing floor would have heard me. And I was begging them to hurry up with that damn epidural. I didn't like the gas. It was giving me just head spins, and I feel like it wasn't relieving the pain that I was experiencing. Finally, and when I say finally, it felt like a long time to me, but they were really efficient in real time. The anaesthetist came and administered the epidural. And Obviously, as soon as I felt the effects of that epidural, my pain was instantly relieved and I just felt so much relief in myself. I could just lay back and just like, oh my gosh, after all of this time, I can just lay here and have some relief. And I was exhausted. I was so tired by this point. I couldn't quite believe that I could continue to labor underneath the epidural, but I just couldn't feel the contractions. It's a really funny thing to get your head around. So as I was laying there, I continued to contract, I continued to labor. And because I had dilated and progressed quite far, I was at 8 centimeters by the time we got to the hospital, they allowed me to continue to labor under the epidural with the intention to push the baby out vaginally the following morning. So it was at about 1 a.m. that I got the epidural. So by that point, I had been in active labor for another 12 hours. Oh my God. How did I do that? I don't know. I wouldn't I wouldn't sign up for a marathon that went for that long, but it's incredible what we can do as women and what we can endure with the support of the hormones in our body and what we do when it's what we have to do, when we have no other choice. So I'm so grateful that I made that choice to go to the hospital and to get that relief and get that support when I so very much needed it by that point. So the plan was to continue to labor under the epidural and to, at around 9:30 the next morning, to check. And if I had dilated that extra couple of centimeters, we would plan to push the baby out. I even got sleep. So my husband and I both slept for around 2 hours, I think. While I was under the epidural, he was at a couch at the end of the bed, and that was everything. That sleep was so necessary to allow me to go through the next phase of the journey and then to, be a mother to a newborn baby on the other side, and for my husband to be there to support me through that as well. So at around 9 a.m., an incredible obstetrician came in and he checked my cervix, only to find that I hadn't quite dilated as they had expected, and there was a thin lip on my cervix, which would make it hard to push the baby out. And with a quick scan, he also found that her head was wedged in an unfavorable position for pushing as well. So the interesting thing was that when I was laboring and progressing the night before at home, I could feel where her bum was in my belly and where her head was and in my pelvis, and she was quite far down and in a good position. However, when we got to the hospital and I was under the epidural, I felt that she moved up and back, and all of a sudden her bum and legs were right wedged up into my left rib cage. So it's almost like she had reversed and she had come back down into my pelvis in a not ideal position. So her head was sideways and sort of chin wedged up a bit. And if I did push her out, it wasn't an ideal pushing position. So this incredible obstetrician explained this whole scenario to me. We sat down, we had a really good talk. I have so many good things to say about the team of surgeons and nurses and anaesthetists that looked after me for what was to come and throughout my birth. So incredible at the Cairns Hospital. The obstetrician explained that the safest way that he believed and what they strongly recommended to birth my baby was via C-section surgery. So after, a little bit of thinking and just wrapping my head around it, I completely trusted his professional opinion and expertise and years of experience. So that wasn't a question for me. It was more so just wrapping my head around it and that change of direction. And it felt really good for us. It felt like it was the right thing to do. It felt like it was definitely the safest option for my baby and for myself. And it felt like we were finally going to meet her, and this was the way we were going to meet her. So we felt really good about it. It wasn't a true emergency. So it wasn't until a couple of hours later that we actually went into the C-section surgery for delivery. So I had a little bit of time that I'm really, really grateful for, that I was able to just wrap my head around everything and mentally prepare myself to go into surgery to deliver our baby girl. I remember on the way into the operating theatre, a beautiful Indigenous nurse gave myself and my baby a blessing. That was really amazing. And I just remember all of the nurses and anaesthetists as I went in, like, just being so kind and so caring and really considering how I felt. You know, I was just a pregnant woman laying on an operating table with all of these people around me, feeling very open and vulnerable, about to surrender to them belly birthing. I love that term, belly birth, my baby, and allowing that to happen. And it's such a vulnerable experience. It takes a lot of strength. I believe, I have a lot of respect for all women who go into a C-section surgery, whether it's planned, whether it's their choice, whether it's not their choice, whether it's a true emergency. That would be really, really hard when there's no time to even wrap your head around the fact that you're going in there and that it's happening. It takes a lot of strength to be cut open and, while you're awake in an operating theatre, for your baby to be pulled out of you. So it's really, really incredible. And I take my hat off to all women who have had a belly birth, all women who birth in any way. So it was a really nice atmosphere in the room. Everyone was there for us. Everyone was there to support us, and everyone was taking care of us. I felt like I was in really good hands, and I do remember laying there and shaking uncontrollably. And this wasn't from nerves. This was actually an effect of the epidural that they had pumped up for the surgery. So a side effect is that shaking. So I was just shaking, and I couldn't stop shaking. And I assured my husband that I was feeling okay mentally, like I was okay. I was breathing through it. I just physically couldn't control the shaking. My husband was right above me. He had his hand in my hair and he was holding my other hand. He was whispering things in my ear the entire time just to let me know that I was safe, that he was there, that he was with me. And obviously that was helping me to feel safe. I wasn't alone. I remember him, telling me that we're about to meet our daughter. After all, through all of this, sometimes you forget that you're about to meet your baby, and that's the most exciting part. So getting her out took less than 10 minutes. The moment she was pulled out of me was, the only word that I can use to describe it is powerful. I have all of these incredible photos that a nurse so kindly took of her being pulled out of my belly, and it's so powerful. It's such an incredible vision, an incredible moment, and I will never ever forget it. In those pictures and in my memory, I can see all of the love, all of the power, all of the endurance and relief and joy all in those pictures. And it's such a good memory. They pulled the sheet down between myself and her as they pulled her out. And, that first moment that you see your baby, wow, just wow. She came out screaming, which was a great sign. And like I said earlier, I threw my head back and just sobbed. It was definitely the most beautiful moment of my life so far. I looked at my husband and he was crying just as much as me, and we just stared at each other in tears of joy, all three of us howling. And something that really has stuck with me and that I really remember is the atmosphere in the room when she was birthed. I distinctly remember hearing a big uproar of joy, like joyous comments, and everyone cheering in the room. So all of the doctors and nurses and the whole support team in the room were all cheering and laughing. I remember someone yelling out, "She's the most beautiful baby I've seen in ages." And the obstetrician pulled the umbilical cord aside and said, "Is this what you ordered?" referring to the gender. And there were so many comments made and everyone was laughing. Someone said, "Drinks are on me after this," or something as a joke. And I think just obviously in the environment that they work in, a healthy screaming baby is just such a beautiful, joyous thing. And it's obviously the best outcome that they could hope for, that they could wish for. They have peds and things on standby during these surgeries because, at the end of the day, it's a surgery and it carries risk. So when they have a good, healthy, positive result, everyone is so happy and their work is done for that surgery, for that day. Honestly, I felt like we were surrounded by angels, and I know I was surrounded by real angels because I called in all of my angels and guardian angels and guides, and my nan and people who have passed that I wanted there with me in the room. And I felt like the whole room was just filled with angels and real life angels in the form of the surgeons that were pulling the baby out of my belly. And it was just pure magic. It was really magical. It was a really magical experience for me, and my husband said he felt the same way. She was brought around and she was put on my chest as soon as possible. I was still shaking hard from the meds, from the drugs, but I couldn't believe that my baby girl was on me. And we made our way out to the recovery section post-theatre, and she began breastfeeding right away, which I was very grateful for. She's been a great feeder and a great sleeper, so I'm very lucky in that regard. And just like that, we were mum and dad. Wow. So Sophia Sunny Collins is her name. Sophia was born on the 2nd of the 3rd, 2023. I think she was waiting for that cool date. That's why she took so long. And she was born at 11:03 a.m. I spent 3 days recovering in hospital afterwards with lots of beautiful midwives taking care of me. This was so necessary, and it also allowed Pelham to go home at night and sleep for the first time for a couple of nights, and really rest and recover so that when we came home and he would be looking after us full time, that he was able to have the strength to do that. He spent each day with me in hospital. He brought me nutritious food, and my amazing mama was also there supporting us and doing the same thing. And when we arrived home, my husband spent a week looking after me solo, even though he was still running his company that had been neglected the whole week prior. He was truly amazing. And the following week, when he had to go back to work, my mum tag teamed in, and she came and cooked and cleaned and did everything for us and just let me sit back and be with my baby. So grateful to have that incredible support of family around me so that I could rest and heal and establish that bond with my baby at the very start. Postpartum nurturing, healing, and recovery is so important to me. I took all of the time and support and nourishing food that I needed, beautiful warming and grounding foods. Many cups of tea were consumed, a hot chocolate each night. I remember that was my thing, a hot chockey each night. I made castor oil packs, and I used heat as pain relief on my womb and for my surgical scar. I rested a lot with my baby, and I saw close friends and family only. It was very minimal interaction with people in those first few weeks. I remember it took around 2.5 weeks for my pain to relieve, and by around 4 weeks after birth, I felt really good. I'm currently recording this podcast at nearly 7 weeks postpartum, and I'm feeling so good now. I'm feeling incredible now, and I'm just beginning, rehab exercises and moving back into my body. And now I can drive, I can socialize, and I can get back out into the world slowly but surely. And as I mentioned, our beautiful little Sophia has slept and fed well, which I'm so grateful for. I think that also allowed me to have a really nice postpartum experience after such a long journey to get there. Wow. Conception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum recovery, not to mention parenthood that follows. They're all just huge, like massive life changes to navigate. And like I've said, I have so much respect for every birthing woman, for every mother. We are badass superwomen. That's what my podcast manager, Rochelle, said to me. We're badass superwomen. And I love that. I'm like, hell yeah, we are. It's such an epic transition that has truly changed me and, as a woman and so many other women who have gone through the same thing. I feel like everything up until this point prepared me for this, and it has been such an incredible journey to meeting our Sophia. I know that we did it together, her little soul and my soul, and that's an unbreakable bond. My husband has also transitioned into such an amazing father. It's so beautiful to see. He was an incredible birth partner. I don't feel that I even have the words to express my gratitude for him throughout the entire pregnancy and labor and birth journey. And now in parenthood, he has always stood by me unwavering throughout pregnancy. He's always supported and respected my choices and backed me up 100%. And he stood by me as my rock, which is what I needed from him. I just needed him to be my rock throughout labor and birth, so incredibly strong. And he is always here grounding me and seeing me and loving me. So thank you, babe. I'm such a believer in everything happening for a grand reason. I do believe that we had the birth that we were meant to have. And, I'm really grateful for that. It was a really beautiful experience. And as much as I wanted my natural home birth, maybe, just maybe, I always had a preference towards the medicalized model. Maybe the hospital is where I actually did feel the most safe in the end, and it was on this birthing journey. Maybe, no, definitely, I learned things on this journey about myself that I didn't know. I think my birth taught me things that I needed to learn about myself. And as much work and learning and unlearning that I did on the fertility journey, I still had, those lessons to experience in my labor and in my birth to prepare me for motherhood. The biggest truth for me is that I'm really accepting of and really proud of my journey from conception to birth. I got the help that I needed when I needed it, and I was open to whatever that looked like. And I feel that the number one, acceptance is the key word for me. I didn't limit myself by expecting things to go a certain way or look a certain way. It should go like this. I should be like this. I should do this. Being accepting of how things are playing out, no matter how they're playing out, can bring a lot of peace and has brought a lot of peace for me personally. Honestly, from my fertility journey through IVF and in my birth, I've been constantly reminded of the uncertainty of life. I feel that each journey has really stripped me down further. I thought that I'd liberated myself of a lot of perfectionism and limitations and things like that on my fertility journey. And I hadn't fully done that. I wasn't being fully honest with myself. And I feel that each experience I have, and especially my birth so recently, continues to just strip me down further, and to bring me closer and closer to the real and raw version of myself. And that's such a beautiful thing. I hope that makes sense. It's like each experience has removed another layer of perfectionism and another mask, has liberated me further, has given me more inspiration to continue to do the work that I do, and given me perspective as to what really matters. And because of that, I feel like a new woman since birth. Since becoming a mother to Sophia, I've never felt more me. I feel more truly, honestly me than I ever have in my life. This is my birth story. I hope that my story of long gestation, long labor, and empowering C-section inspires you and other women to know that you can do things however the fuck you want. Things can play out however they do, and you can own it and find the magic in all of it. Yeah? No matter how you do things, no matter how things play out in your life, if you own it and accept it and take responsibility for it, it can be truly magical, and it can, these experiences will shape you as a person in a really, truly positive way. Better yet, you can see the beauty, you can really then see the beauty in all of it, the beauty in all of these experiences. I want you to know that you are worthy. You are brave, and you are so strong, no matter what your story, no matter what your birth story, no matter your story to conception, no matter what happens in your life, nothing determines or defines your worth. That is there, and you are enough right now, just as you are, with every experience that you've had. It's all beautiful, and I hope that you can see the magic in all of it. like I have too. Thanks for tuning in.